Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, here with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, H.A. Happy to not see you again.
Oh, it makes me sad. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a good time.
We are both back in our respective coasts. I guess you were always on your respective coasts, but I went back to mine. Little tired after a late flight, but doing all right. This is definitely like a treble coffee kind of a morning, though. So I am really excited about my iced coffee right now.
Was it a red eye?
It was not. It just ended up being delayed due to the power outages out in San Francisco, which, you know, I was pleasantly surprised by how the denizens of San Francisco took the power outage in stride. Did not see too much mayhem, just mostly brunching and people just out in the streets. Seemed like I do feel badly for whoever was caught in the elevators, because there was actually a few that were caught in my hotel. And Bill, like, at first was just like, because they were being just kind of weird about, like, you know, they were like, oh, if you leave the floor, we're not sure if you're going to get back into your room for now. And, but he escaped the building easily. And we just wandered around the city, which was kind of nice. It wasn't out everywhere. There were, like, specific streets that still had some power, hence our ability to get brunch. But, you know, it was all good. But, you know, I think if had it been, you know, they had it back on by 5 p.m. So I think had night fallen, it might have been a little different. And also, it's not too hot in San Francisco, so no worries about air conditioning generally, but the flight's screwed up.
Okay.
And clearly I'm tired.
Well, I'm glad you're back in one piece.
Yeah, and the first thing we did was order a pizza when we got back to the house. It was great. And the pizza place was open because it's New York. It was awesome. But anyway, we have some things to talk about today. There's actually been a few news items hanging out there. Do you want to start out with yours, or do you want me to jump in? So, a couple of different things in the news in the real world, with a gentleman who was arrested for stockpiling guns in preparation for the zombie apocalypse. This is in Spokane, Washington, and I guess he had been arrested previously in Las Vegas for firing a gun at the police, and then was, you know, hit by return gunfire, sent to prison, and then headed out to Washington when he got released. And there he did not stay out of trouble, because the police apparently confiscated 36 guns and 35,000 rounds of ammo. And, you know, not a big deal if you're not, I guess, you know, already in trouble with the law,
AKA a felon.
Yeah, but he I guess had been, you know, the other pro tip, if you're doing this and you're holding guns illegally, probably you shouldn't be discussing your zombie apocalypse prepping activities with other people. And he wanted to be prepared for doomsday scenarios, and apparently somebody tipped off the cops, so that's how they caught him. So, you know, not you know, discreet in his zombie apocalypse preparations. But
probably not the guy we want to have a massive weapons stockpile.
No, probably not. And in other news, from our favorite state of the zombie apocalypse, Florida, there was a gentleman who robbed a home because he was afraid that the zombies were out to get him. And he just said he couldn't stay outside, had to get inside the house. And unfortunately, the people who were, you know, the owners of the house woke up and caught him and just heard him rifling through things. He basically stole a pink selfie stick, a Bluetooth speaker, a wallet, and a jacket, I think. But the selfie stick was kind of amazing. So there you are, Florida, bringing it to us with the zombie news.
Never lets us down. Yep.
Never, ever lets us down. I'm glad nobody was hurt, though, because that had to be pretty scary, waking up in the middle of the night with some dude that thinks the zombies are after him.
Honestly, I'm watching the video from the Spokane guy with the weapon stash, and he kind of just looks like a dentist. He doesn't look like,
Yeah, no, he looks just sort of like your everyman. I
yeah,
was expecting
interesting.
something a little different, but it's
Mm-hmm.
always the quiet ones.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite headline of this week was was the Spanish government are not planning for a zombie apocalypse. This was in response to an inquiry from somebody who I think was just annoyed at the different responses that they were getting to various things that they were presenting to the Spanish government, and it was basically a way of poking the bear a little bit. But they came back with a pretty, like, to me, hilarious response: is that they don't have to be worried about brain dead citizens taking over, that they're not a threat. Just kind of a funny little tongue-in-cheek response, but I enjoyed it thoroughly. So you may want to check that out. And lastly, something that just boggles the mind, that you sent me while I was wandering around San Francisco. And I'm going to let you take this one because I'm just
Actually,
still kind of amazed by it.
there's a couple pieces of Walking Dead news, but yeah, the first one that came out that I saw, Coleman Domingo had put on Instagram last week was that Fear the Walking Dead got renewed for season 4. And if you're keeping track at home, we haven't aired season 3 yet. So what, WTF over?
Right.
They've, they've always been, I feel like there hasn't been a season of this show that hasn't been renewed before it aired, though.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Before the previous one aired.
Yeah, I don't know, but I just think that maybe, especially with this show, I just think there's nothing else on whenever they air it, so maybe the ratings are okay and they feel all right doing that. But something must have happened where they were like, okay, we're going to do this, which is kind of interesting given that the ratings from the main Walking Dead is down. So
Yeah,
that's
and
the other piece of news.
that's another piece of news. And a third thing is we tweeted this out actually from our reanimated Twitter handle when I saw this online. Walking Dead at the Walking News, which I guess is probably not 100% an AMC Twitter account. In fact, it's very unlikely. Did a poll. Will you be watching Fear the Walking Dead? And they got 3,000 votes, and it was 42% yes, 40% no, 18 abstained. It's a very close poll for a Twitter feed that only fans of the genre will be following. They're
Right.
not getting like, and fans are saying, eh.
I actually had a conversation with somebody who I would definitely consider to be I don't want to say he's like a super fan, but he's definitely a fan of things horror and zombie. And we were out with a bunch of friends a couple weeks ago, and he said, I have to confess something to you. I'm not watching Walking Dead anymore. And it was like this really funny moment because I forget what I was saying. I think I was talking about the ratings issue, and he just felt like he had to confess it. And then he was saying it in like a low whisper, like it was something to be ashamed of. So and if he's not watching it, I'm sure that there's other people as well. And this poll kind of shows it.
Did he mean Walking Dead Prime or the spinoff?
No, he meant Prime.
Oh goodness.
So that was kind of a big deal, at least from what I know of him. So
Mm.
I think if there may be some exhaustion of The Walking Dead out there, some fan exhaustion. So
Yeah. Well, Decider.com decided to put together an article about the recent drop in Walking Dead ratings and whether or not that means that the show or the genre is coming to an end. I think that it's horse poop, poppycock. What's the word? Because
Balderdash.
Balderdash, thank you. They write this article. They say, ratings are down. There was only, I forget, where's the number? Fifth season finale drew 15.7 million viewers. Then the number has decreased, I believe. So yeah, the seventh season finale only drew 11.3. So a drop of 3 or 4 million viewers, which then they have to go on to clarify that that's still a huge number for television.
Well, it
So
is, and I actually think that some of the stuff that they are not taking into account, or that, and it's something you and I have talked about a little bit, is just the difference in ratings for shows now as opposed to even 5 years ago, because of the amount of content that's just being pushed out, especially to Netflix, Amazon. All these things have content that is readily available. People can binge watch. I think it's very hard to like, and that's something that they're not really. I don't think anybody is really tracking necessarily. It's just maybe the fans that might be watching things maybe aren't watching it in the moment, but they definitely do binge watch, and I tend to do that too. I'll save up a few episodes and watch them as
yeah.
opposed to watching them in the moment, just because I'd prefer to know more, and I don't like the week to week viewing.
Yeah, no, who
So
enjoys a good cliffhanger like season 6 seems to think we all want.
I
Um,
know on every
but
episode pretty much. So
I'm not sure exactly how Nielsen works or ever has. Like, I know that they send out surveys and stuff, but I assume that their model has changed as consumption of media has changed along with it. But just to see like what other numbers are for TV, I took a look at Nielsen's top of 2016. So this isn't actually going to reflect all of season 7 of The Walking Dead. It'll just be season 7A, but it's the fourth highest rated primetime TV show in 2016 at 18.8 million average viewers for the first half of the season. So even that 11 million, and who knows where Decider's getting their numbers, Nielsen's getting theirs. I'm sure there's some margins of error. But beating Walking Dead is Sunday Night Football at number 3 with 19.2, NCIS, which I think has had some of the highest ratings for decades. And there's 2 versions of NCIS on this top 10 list with 19.8. And then number 1 is The Big Bang Theory, your favorite TV show, at almost 20 million average viewers.
yeah, do you know that Mark Harmon is the highest paid actor in the world?
Really?
Yep.
He deserves every cent of it. Man's a gift to America.
And he doesn't age. I don't know.
He really hasn't aged in a long time.
I don't know what he's got keeping him going, but man, they should bottle it.
The highest single telecast, which you'll probably guess was the Super Bowl in 2016, saw 112.5 million viewers. Which is, there's just some numbers to put it in perspective. So even if the 11.5 million season finale, season 7 is accurate from Decider, the rest of the season did really well. And I'm sure it's not great for any show to be like, oh yeah, we lost like half of our viewers for our season finale. That's kind of, and we'll get to our review of season 7 soon.
Yep, we're actually almost catching up to real time. Look at that.
It's crazy. And then season 6, the numbers that we were looking at in these episodes we're talking about today are both firmly in the 13 millions. And I think, based on the numbers from Wikipedia anyway, those both went down a smidge from the season premiere of season 6. But yeah, it's just to say that like all these numbers are still bananas high for television, essentially. That there isn't a whole lot else that's doing this well. It's certainly the only show of this kind that is this high on the ratings charts.
True.
So,
and, if you put it into perspective, just thinking in terms of this genre and the fact that it's doing this well this many years on, that is kind of crazy. So, whatever. I think they're just trying to get more press, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I guess that's kind of the news. Shall we push on to episodes 3 and 4 of season 6?
Let's do it. This is one of my least favorite episodes out of the season. I don't know. There's so many things out of this season that I dislike tremendously. But this episode just gave me it was so annoying.
And this episode is called Thank You.
And
it was written by Angela Kang.
Okay, yeah, and directed by Michael Slovis.
Yeah, and it's aired on October 25th, 2015 to an audience of 13.14 million. And this comes hot on the heels of the attack by the wolves on Alexandria, which we talked about in our episode 135. But now, as the season does a lot, is we switch back to Rick's group, basically. There's nothing we see nothing of Alexandria really until the very end of this
Right.
episode.
Right. And there, and if folks remember where we left it, this is where the herd had drastically changed direction due to the horn from the semi truck that had sort of been crashed into one of the buildings in Alexandria. And so now they're on a direct path to like hit the community. And so we've got Michonne, Heath, Scott, Annie, Glenn, Nicholas, Rick. Who else do we have? Sasha, Abraham, and Daryl, all out there in the wild.
And several, well, yeah, Abraham, Daryl, and Sasha are in front of the convoy.
Right.
Yeah, and then Rick's group actually has a lot of people who don't even make it on screen, like Tobin. I think
Right.
Tobin's the only one who's a named character who is with that other part of the Alexandria crew.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of randoms there.
Yeah, but we don't even hear his voice on the radio.
No.
Like last time, we had heard him saying stuff to Rick about shooting guns to draw zombies back onto the path, etc. But the radio comms have broken down, which is funny or weird. It must be that he's dropped his radio, I guess, because he's also able to talk to Sasha and Abraham and Daryl, who are at least 5 miles away.
Right.
And that's a long range for a little
Yeah.
walkie like that. But then also with Rick are several Alexandrians whose names we don't know. We've seen Sturgis before because of his hat, so his hat is recognizable. He was one of the guys who was pooping himself with Carter last time when Rick wanted them to fight zombies.
Yeah.
which was a fun little flashback. And then there's like, I think it's Heath's whole scouting crew, which is tall bald guy,
Yep.
and lady with the braid, brunette with the braid.
And Annie, right?
Yeah, I think tall bald guy's name is Scott, but I'm not even sure. They
Yeah.
did a pretty bad job of, other than Sturgis, because people yell Sturgis as he runs away, and then they go Sturgis
Right.
again later.
Scott's the one that gets shot in the leg by
Yes,
Sturgis.
I think that is Scott, and I'm still not sure. I know that Betsy is married to other tall guy who gets bit,
David.
but I don't. Was his name David?
I think so.
Wow. All right. Well, more power to you. Good job on figuring out names. And we also have whiny guy number 1.
Yeah.
Whiny guy number 1 doesn't last long. In
Well,
fact,
whatever their names are, it honestly doesn't matter too much in this episode, only because
it kind of does because Rick takes Glenn and Michonne aside after being like, okay, I'm gonna go back and get the camper. Try to get these guys back in one piece. It's not going to work. You're going to lose a lot of them. He doesn't say that, but he's like, they're not all going to make it. Do what you can. And that's kind of a point of, it's very prophetic, and it's a point of contention because Heath overhears it, and then that puts Heath butting heads with Michonne for no apparent reason and at the worst possible time.
Yeah. I don't see. I do think it is somewhat deliberate that they're sort of weird about the names, is because they make it clear that these are expendable people. Well, not expendable, but they're red shirts basically.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. No matter what Michonne is doing, and Michonne and Glenn try their best efforts to get this group through and to do what they need to do. We lose a lot of people in this episode before we even really know them.
Yeah, which makes it not really a loss, right?
No, and they do try. I mean, they try to do a few little things. The letter to Betsy.
Yeah, Anna goes out like a boss, and she comes across very strong throughout the episode.
Okay, but I have some
Annie?
issues. Annie.
Sorry.
I have some issues here with how they handle a few of the things. One of
Okay.
the reasons that this episode infuriates me is that there are a lot of almost, there are moments where things happen and you feel like they shouldn't have happened. So, for example, Annie's been injured, so they make her this makeshift crappy cane that suddenly gives out, and I just feel like they would have come up with a better crutch for her somehow. They had more materials, they had more options. They give her, what was that, like a weird golf club or something? I don't even know.
It wasn't even. Yeah, it was a really narrow piece of metal.
It just was not. And I feel like the adrenaline, she would have kept going, and it just felt a little bit forced the way she fell behind. There's a few moments like that. I'll leave the one that bothers me the most. There's two at the end
I mean,
of this.
by the time she gets left behind, that's pretty late in the episode.
Yeah.
First, we have to give props to Sturgis for pulling out his 9mm Beretta and getting jumped by a zombie and shooting really quickly. He shoots twice, and then one of those shots takes out Scott in the leg.
Yeah.
And then Scott surprisingly manages not to get eaten while he's lying down, and a couple of zombies are trying to kill him.
But yet other random people get bitten. Just
Yeah.
kind of, which again seems crazy to me.
Anybody who's complaining a lot basically gets
bitten.
killed pretty quickly or runs away. Yeah.
And I get it that a lot of these Alexandrians are not used to fighting, and they're kind of getting up to speed on that. However, you still have a lot of Heath's party here, and it seems like they're a little bit more, I don't know. They seem to be a little bit more equipped to fight, and Michonne certainly is. And there's just these moments that just feel sort of like these haphazard zombies wandering around that just kind of like appear very slowly and just bite people without any resistance for the most part. So
Yeah.
And bite them in the worst places, like right in the shoulder, where you can't cut off a shoulder really.
Well,
or
that
right
dude,
that guy, like
Mr. Betsy, that zombie is a ninja. It comes up in a perfectly quiet moment and is right
and
on it.
nobody notices, and it's just done. And so it's like that just. Oh, that whole scene just drove me nuts. I'm like, really? Come on. First time it drove me nuts. This time, even worse. I was
And
like,
he's such a big guy. You see a guy like that who's a good guy getting bit. You're like, God damn it! Come on, man.
Yeah,
We need those big guys.
right. And luckily he knows what it means, so not to he's
This is the thing. Like
like a
the rest of
trooper.
the rest of the episode, he's totally a dead man walking. But he's like, I know what this means, but let's do this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the greatest.
Yeah.
Oh, Scott, if that's your real name, we miss you already.
No, Scott Scott was shot in the leg.
Sorry, not Scott. You're right. That was Alan. Let's call him
Okay, the other thing,
Mr. Betsy.
they make these big guys look very similar to each other. Or at least I found them to look very similar to each other. So I actually had a hard time sometimes differentiating them.
Which big guys are you mistaking for one another?
I don't know. A
'Cause
couple of the Alexandrians.
Mr. Betsy is Caucasian and Scott is African American.
I know.
So those two big guys do not look the
No,
same.
not those two big guys. There's just some other nondescript Alexandrian. Sturgis,
Oh.
the only thing I find descriptive about him is his hat.
He has the beautiful hat. Yeah.
So anyway.
Annie has her braid pulled in front of her. Like, I don't know. They tried to do some distinction. The first guy who gets eaten, Mr. Complainy Pants, who's like, this is all Rick's fault, dies within 30 seconds. So he kind of
maybe
looks like Hawkeye.
I'm thinking of Mr. Complainy Pants, I think.
Yeah. He doesn't last long. And they all just stand around watching him get eaten by a zombie because they're terrible. But speaking of terrible, then they get to some town. And by the time they get to this town, they've been going through the woods. They're carrying people. Because now they've got Scott's been shot and Annie has twisted her ankle. Mm-hmm. But it seems like they've been traveling for a really long time.
Yeah.
And also, did you notice that it was 3 minutes into the episode by the time that the horn stopped?
Yeah.
So it was a couple minutes at the end of episode 1 and at least 3 minutes in this episode. And who knows, time being
what
very
it is here.
subjective in TV, it could be shorter or longer. But we were talking last time that it didn't seem like the horn was on that long in the Alexandria episode.
Right.
It was just as long as it took Spencer to get down to the basement of the ground floor of the tower and bash through a door. But then that wasn't, I don't know, maybe it really took him 5 minutes to do that. But then they get to this town, and the longer they've been traveling, the less I am believing that this herd was ever really going to be a huge problem for Alexandria.
Right.
I mean, if it's really like 5-6 miles, what are the odds that herd is all going to stay cohesive and go in one direction towards Alexandria?
And they seem to be making it more cohesive. So it's almost like they're making their own problems here.
In a way.
And then the other part of this is that they're in this little town, and to me there are a lot of possibilities here for them. I mean, I know what they're trying to do, but do any of these places have back doors? I don't know. There's just a lot of problems I have with this.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
and
they
knowing that this was on the route home, like why didn't they do more research?
right.
They had all that time to park 100 cars by the quarry, but they couldn't just be like, all right, let's clear out this stupid town.
They
Oh,
just
and
make
let's make sure
this
that we don't all have to rely on Nicholas to get us through this alive.
right, right. Nicholas is having some tough times in this episode.
The toughest of times, you might say.
Yes, the toughest of times.
But Glenn's
And
like,
in
okay, Nicholas, you've got the lead. Or actually, Heath is like, because Heath has given him some, thrown him some shade about losing his whole team in this town.
yeah, and a little PTSD because Nicholas sees like people he's left behind, and he does the right thing, and like, okay, so here's a piece that bothers me a bit about this episode. We see a few different people from Alexandria beaten, eaten, and they don't dispatch them. They just kind of let and I know that they're trying not to sort of attract the attention of the walkers. There's a couple of things where I will excuse that, but there are definitely some moments in this episode where I'm just like, man, you don't leave a person behind like that. Do a clear shot to the head or something. Don't leave them being like torn apart, the
Oh, you're talking
intestines
about
and
with
everything.
Annie and Mr. Betsy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
they could have
especially
totally put a shot in Mr.
Annie. I
Betsy.
understand a little bit more because it was tough. She was getting swarmed, and
Yeah.
maybe tough to do that. However, Mr. Betsy, right there, Michonne's got her. It's not like you have to waste ammo. She's got her katana. Like, come
Yeah.
on, man.
I think they all looked pretty shaken by that point because she had barely made it over the fence. So maybe.
Another issue I have. Really, do you think Michonne's gonna really have a hard time getting over the fence? It was almost like, oh, grab my ankles, please. Oh, wait, this is so much of an effort. It was so ridiculous. It just infuriated me. I
Hmm.
just don't buy that Michonne would not have made that fence in like 5 seconds flat.
We've also had a few shots of Rick sprinting.
Yeah, a lot of sprinting shots. He must have been really tired at the end of the shoot of this episode.
Yeah, I think that was the case, and he'd been he has there's an interesting scene in this in part of his running where we hear Glenn's last radio broadcast to him and where he calls him dumbass, which is symbolic and kind of scary foreshadowing for I think people who like the show because that's the first thing he ever called Rick
Yep.
when he was inside the tank in Atlanta. But then Rick also gets into a little fracas. He uses this tiny little pocket knife, which I'm like, I could have sworn he had a bigger knife than this,
I
but he
thought he
uses
did
this.
too.
He breaks off his tiny pocket knife in the head of the first zombie. He's got two more to go. Luckily, the second one has a machete stuck through its shoulder, and Rick conveniently or not sure why, like chooses to put his hand on the zombie to keep it away from him, like but on the machete, so cuts his hand on a zombie infected machete.
Yeah.
It's one of these things that raise questions, certainly on Talking Dead and places like that. Where what's the difference between a zombie bite that's going to kill you no matter how small it is, and cutting yourself on a machete that is like mixed in with zombie stuff? And I know everybody's infected, but it makes it kind of muddy, the transmission.
It makes it really muddy, and I mean, to me, this is just sort of a silly thing that they did. I don't think they should have bothered with this. This is just dumb. If you just don't cut your main cast member like this with a zombie infected weapon. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Like the questions that it raises don't seem to be paid off with any kind of reward, I guess.
No, and you set your sort of standard. This is how it's transmitted, and you got to stick by that. So I think that this was a stupid decision for anybody to make in this. So, but anyway,
It's always cool when they can pull a weapon out of a zombie and use it to kill the zombie. I mean,
yeah, I'm
that's
fine with that.
yeah.
But and we got a lot of Rick running around, and there's been a lot of tension between the Alexandrians and Rick's group, like us versus them. I think that's a lot of what they were trying to pull with the tension between Heath and Michonne, and Michonne being like, "Man, you just don't know what it's like out there."
Oh, that
And
speech gets really old, doesn't it?
it does, it really does. But I think that's what they were trying to do, and then sort of trying to have more of a cohesive group, despite the fact that they just keep dropping like flies.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty funny that Heath's like crack team of scouts, which is Scott and Annie, are both basically walking wounded within five
Right.
minutes at the beginning of the episode. I guess it's telling that they don't just get eaten
Mm.
like our pal Sturgis and our pal whiny complainer guy, but they're the nice thing, or nice, that's not the right way to put it, but Annie and Scott both say leave us behind at the pet
Mm.
store, which is like, all right, you guys get it, you're not cowards. And part of me is like, yeah, why don't you guys all just hole up?
Right.
Pet store maybe isn't a great place, they don't have supplies, they can't live there for days, and it might take days,
Yeah, and
but
there's really no back door. Come on, guys. Ugh, drives me crazy.
well, this is what they get for following Nicholas, honestly.
Well, and then the other piece of it is the walkers that suddenly appear in the pet store after all that time. Come
I know,
on.
yeah, that was
That
kind of
was
silly.
ridiculous. Suddenly they appear and cause a distraction. There just seems a lot to me, the writing or the sort of setup in this, just sort of this sort of not sort of, it's just
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it's like the opposite of a Deus Ex Machina trope, where
Yes.
we need more drama. Let's introduce some that seems unlikely. But then their exit scene from the pet store is actually pretty cool. I was like,
Yeah, that was
it could
cool.
have gone either way for me. I was like, are they just gonna hole up, or there's the whole herd is coming around the corner? What's gonna happen? And they shoot their way out in a pretty cool scene.
Yep.
Apparently, there's only 5 zombies outside. I don't know why they didn't just try to go out earlier, but they're
Yeah.
using guns. They're making a lot of noise, which is not the first choice. But then this is the scene where Annie totally gets left behind, and there was no way she was going to be able to keep up, even with her crappy metal, looked like a staple cane.
Yeah, the cane was terrible.
Why didn't they try to do like a fireman lift
Something.
anything? There was enough
Some
of them where there could have been two people. Well, I guess Scott is also gimpy, so there
yeah,
was
but dog
they had
camping
two
is
two
going on.
able yeah they had two
But
able
Heath was
bodied
okay.
shoot. Heath is okay, Michonne is okay. Between those two, they should have been able to help out a little more. But we've also kind of Scott and Glenn, sorry, and Nicholas have gone off to try and light a building on fire to create this distraction. It takes them a really long time to figure out that that's not going to work for some reason.
Yeah.
And by the
Well,
time they figure it out, the
because it
building's
was
been burned down.
yeah, it was already burnt down. But then it's
I know.
like okay,
How many other? There's so many buildings. Like, why has it got to be that one? By the time they get to it, there's like a block of visible distance in either direction, or like in a couple different directions, and it's like they look around, and suddenly there's a horde of zombies.
right, and they're everywhere, and the only place to run is like an alleyway. Okay, now we come to one of my least favorite stupid things in this, and they're running down the alley, and there are clearly stairs there. They're
Yeah, but
blocked.
they've been barricaded. But yeah, why not try them?
Yeah, but they're not like super barricaded. There's like a mattress there. It's like they could still get up there and
Yeah.
at least buy themselves some time. I mean, I know the walkers might, but the buildings are kind of close together. I feel like easier to take care of them if they're coming through a stairwell one by one. Which I know there might be an overwhelming thing, but the way this was all set up just seemed implausible.
Hmm.
And then of course, the scene with Nicholas's last hurrah.
Well, what a hurrah it is.
Yeah.
He can't handle it.
Yep.
He just can't. He's got. This show also does a thing with people with curly hair, like Rick and Nicholas, where their hair gets sweaty all at once.
Yeah, I know. It's totally like they've been doused down by some sort of
It was just
I
in a
don't know,
mister.
like some sort of voice. It's like, okay, curly hair. Let's like douse that guy with some oil or something.
Let's see all the curls right now. I want to see them all. So it goes badly. He says thank you and then shoots himself in the head with his right hand. He's facing Glenn. He shoots himself in the head with his right hand. I think in theory his body should move to the left,
Right, but it doesn't.
instead it moves kind of straight forward and to the right. And Glenn sort of is trying to like support him, but just ends up falling down underneath him from the top of a dumpster all the way to the ground. And then we see a lot of claws and guts, and we see Glenn screaming.
Yeah. And not shutting up. And, this is, of course, the episode where everybody's like, oh, is Glenn dead? Is he not? And, there were a lot of comments about Glenn making an appearance in one way or the other that they were gonna close out that storyline, that it wouldn't just end that
Right.
way.
I
And
forgot that they said that.
yeah, it was so ridiculous. And I called foul. I knew that they would not kill him off here. And I just knew that they wouldn't. And it was just really annoying that they did this.
Part of what made it believable in a way was the dumbass thing on the radio for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they were definitely, but that, okay, so this sort of contrived offing of a character or fake out, I just find it so manipulative and stupid.
Yes.
And really, to me, just a real disservice to the show's fans. And look, we've had a lot of near misses with Glenn, definitely, and it just sort of like continues on. Maybe it's a little bit of a gimmick and it's kind of funny, but in this case, I just thought they took this a step too far.
Well, we don't know. As far as I know, he's dead, and it's not even close to the end of the episode, which is also funny. Maybe that's what gives it away, that it's not for real. Is that this
Yeah, more
happens with
stuff
5,
happens.
10 more minutes to go. Rick has the whole thing where he gets to the camper and then drives it somewhere and then makes an impassioned speech to Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham because he can't talk to anybody else, and about like not going back to Alexandria even though he's hearing gunfire there. And then he gets attacked. It's actually a pretty good jump scare.
Yeah, I jumped.
Yeah. It's Mr. Clean Lips busts in and starts shooting right away, and Rick and one other wolf, but Rick is able to dispatch the two of them, and then the other three wolves are just kind of sneaking around on the side of the camper that doesn't have a door.
But don't understand mirrors.
Don't understand mirrors or assault rifles, but then neither does Rick, because you don't have to fire that thing on full auto,
No.
wasting an entire magazine through to a blind target. I mean, sure, he gets the job done because it's television,
Right.
but frustrating. And then his car is broken and it doesn't start, and he's starting to get all weepy because he also found a jar of baby food in the pocket of one of the wolves. So now he's like, oh, I do want to go back to Alexandria.
Right.
So it's kind of a cool, I don't know, like that scene without the Glenn and Nicholas thing, it would have been like a cool ending to an episode.
It would have.
But that thing coming right after the Glenn and Nicholas thing, you're like, well, I don't know how to feel.
Right.
It definitely feels like the end of everything. Like the show
does.
is, because Michonne and her two, I guess Scott and Heath, limp back to Alexandria, and you just see them like, whoa, what's going on here? Because they see the 18-wheeler, but
Yep.
nothing else. They haven't
And
gotten
lots of
inside
stuff,
yet.
and lots of stuff is kind of like burned, and
Yeah.
they're not, things are not looking good. The other annoying piece of this is the weird Daryl Sasha Abraham exchange, because Daryl's like, I'm just gonna go off on my own, you guys are on your own, and then he like comes back. He's just been like riding his bike around this entire episode, wasting fuel.
Same as the first episode, really.
Yep. So not a good use of Daryl in this, in my opinion, but okay. Yeah. And so you would think that maybe they would resolve some of these storylines in the episode following this, which is episode 4 of season 6, but they don't.
No, and I'm torn on Here's Not Here. It's an hour-long episode, written by Scott Gimple and directed by Stephen Williams. Also has 13 and change in viewers. When I saw it was an hour-long episode coming up, the first time I watched the season, I was like, wow, 2 hour-long episodes in the first 4 episodes of a season. That's crazy. That's going to be, oh my God, we're going to figure it all out. We're going to find out what happened to Glenn. Is he really dead? Is Rick going to be surrounded and eaten? What happened to Alexandria, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's like a good story.
It's a good story. It reminds me of Kill Bill, where Beatrix goes to learn her martial arts from her master. And that's what it reminds me of, like lots of flashbacks with Morgan. We see, and there's cool stuff about Morgan here, no doubt. Just the placement of this episode is kind of interesting. And he, we learn how he becomes an Aikido master.
Yeah, from a psychiatrist. So we also see him leave Kings County, and we see him at the height of his insanity. And what that like means. Basically, that he's killing humans as well as zombies.
Right.
He's a killing machine. He's a total badass.
Well, he's just totally working on instinct. He's definitely not. He is not putting a ton of thought into anything. Still saying the stuff that we heard him saying when Rick and Michonne last saw him. With his his weird little rambling thing. He is surviving to an extent, but really not differentiating between walkers and humans at this point.
We don't see him eat anything. All we see him do is drink water, which he purifies over a fire, which is kind of weird. So it's like on some level he's got this self-preservation to purify water, but I don't know about if they're just not letting us see eating for whatever reason. He's also got an assault rifle that he never shoots until he shoots at Eastman. He's just using it as like a club, and that weapon is, I don't think it's that durable. I think it's mostly plastic.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like, industrial, but I don't know that you could cave in that many heads and have it still have a stock on it after too many of those.
Right. And so he has a little camp, but he's kind of wandering around the forest. And during the course of those travels, hears a goat bleating, which is really, really loud.
Yeah.
And I have to throw out something here, which I just was, if you've got a goat, you gotta like either keep it inside or keep it quiet somehow. But that goat has got to be calling every single walker that's coming by. And I don't really buy that the goat would still be alive at this point, but hard to be super vigilant about the loud goat. And so Morgan, of course, at this point thinks food, or we think he thinks food. So he goes and he's going to kill the goat, and this big guy comes out and asks him politely not to kill the goat, and when Morgan is not complying, just knocks him out. And this enters this fantastic actor who I really adore. I don't know if you remember him, Stuart, but he was in Fargo.
Yeah, apparently that was his rise to greatness, was his Mr. Gunderson.
Yeah, and he was so good in it.
Wasn't he a pretty small part in that? He was the guy who painted duck stamps, right?
Yep, duck stamps. This is John Carroll Lynch, who we're talking about, and he's been in a ton of other things too.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what I first remember seeing him in.
He's been in all kinds of movies and TV. Just like every year, he's got multiple projects going on.
And I thought he was really great in this particular role. So
he was good. He was, he wasn't necessarily believable as an Aikido master,
nor as somebody who's a vegetarian who's been living like this for a while, because he's still pretty portly.
Yeah, he's a big fella, but the charm is, to the max, and he's a good. It's a good, well written character. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. But by the time I get to the end of this episode, I feel cheated.
Yep.
Thematically, based on all of the stories and loose ends that we have right now. I mean, do we need to know Morgan's origin story as a new character right now?
Right. It just seemed like a really, again, manipulative and annoying placement of this particular episode. I don't know why exactly they placed this here. It just seemed like, oh, we need to do a Morgan story and we're going to throw this in. And also, we still want to leave everybody hanging about Glenn. So we're gonna just do this.
And Rick, yeah.
And Rick. And, I mean, I think we need to, people do want to know why Morgan's, now okay and all zen and stuff. But, I felt like this episode didn't need to be an hour long. I don't know how you felt, Stuart, but I definitely felt like it was dragging a lot during certain portions of it.
I zoned. The second time around, I was not interested in watching with great detail because it's a real slow burn.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, it's tough to, I mean, obviously a lot of time has passed in this episode, but I definitely was very skeptical about how much time it took Morgan to also become an Aikido master somehow. And I know it's been a lot of time, but not enough to give him this much facility with this weapon. And, he suddenly has picked up everything, it seems, pretty quickly. And I don't know, like, it just, to me, it just didn't fit in with this whole season. Another one of the reasons that this season infuriates me, I
I mean, it
guess.
kind of does because it only serves to underline the contrast between Morgan and Carol for when things start to even get worse between the two of them later on in the season. In a way, we do need it, but I just think with everything else going on, I don't know about the placement
Yeah,
is
but
all.
eh. And sadly, our friend, I don't think we need to get into too many more details about it, but our friend Eastman bites it, but not before Morgan has figured out the way and has recovered from his PTSD.
Well, he has, but then he reverts pretty quickly.
He does, but, he's
He has a, I don't know, what do you call that, a
a
relapse, but then
regression, yeah.
he also seems to recover from that again
Yeah, he
before the
has,
end of the episode. So
he
it's just
does.
very strange. Like we have to have this rubber banding of his emotional and mental condition.
Yes, and alas, Tabitha the goat also does not make it.
Oh,
So, and the sort of like wrap up of this episode is Morgan trying to convert the wolf that we originally saw him confront when we first saw him sort of display his new fighting skills. The one who was talking to him by the fire. And some people just can't save them, I guess. But he basically listened to Morgan's whole story and was not impressed and told him he was going to kill him and everybody. So, and Morgan still didn't kill him, so I guess that's progress.
yeah. There's something very unsettling about the guy,
Yeah.
the wolf. It's another great performance, honestly. Even though he has much less screen time than Morgan or Eastman, but this guy is just like, you see how I'm shaking? Comes across like a little wounded rabbit, but he's also exhibiting zero fear. So
Yep.
you just know he's not a yeah he's a super threat. Or at least we should. At least
Yeah, he
Morgan should.
seems like a predator. He seems animalistic, and I'm fine with Morgan not necessarily killing him, but I probably would have knocked him out if I had been Morgan. Just sort of locking the house behind him. And, we did see the repercussions of Morgan not taking action because the wolves that went and tried to attack Rick were some of the people that Morgan let go from before. So there are at least in my mind, there are problems with this philosophy from a survival point of view. I understand not necessarily killing innocent people in the woods, but these people are also trying to kill you, and they're threats. So at least trying to disarm them or do something, but that guy being left alone in the house makes me really freaked out. So.
And rightly so. So the episode ends. We are like, well, we know nothing really new other than we know why Morgan is the way he is. But it seems like when you consider how he was crazy for probably a year and a half doing his thing, maybe a year. I don't know how early Dwayne was killed by his mom
Right.
zombie.
Yep.
But
Mombi?
he was in the depths of his insanity for a long time. And
Yeah.
with Eastman, he spends, it's hard to tell, but maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. It like doesn't seem like the seasons change at all, but it is the South. And but now he's firmly on this path. I don't know. It can be explained away by like his determination not to relapse again into a murderer. But when he talks to Rick last episode or in the season premiere, he says, "Rick, I'm a killer." What he's talking about having Pete buried somewhere else. He's like, "Look, I'm a killer. So are you." He's not kidding because he actually was killing people in cold blood.
Yep.
So I feel like it's definitely added some interesting elements. And Morgan is he was already one of the more interesting characters in the cast,
Right.
and now he is even more so.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the timing, you gotta question it. That's all.
Yeah, agreed. So that kind of wraps up this episode for the most part. I mean, with the ending, of course, being Rick, and this is, leads us to the next part. But you can hear Rick's cry, "Open the gate!" In
Was that Rick?
I think so. It sounded like him.
I couldn't tell.
You couldn't tell Rick's classic bellow? I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was Rick.
Okay, well, we'll find out.
I guess we shall find out.
We'll find out when we start our next podcast, where we will review episodes 5 and 6, which will be called Now and Always Accountable. And yay, let's keep going down this garden path.
Yep. But thanks as always for listening. Let us know if this episode infuriated you as much as me. Send us a tweet, reanimated PCast on the Twitters, and reanimatedpodcast.com if you want to leave a comment. And if you want to send us a message, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com.
That's all the ways. So hit us up, and thanks for listening.
Indeed. Ciao.